Things just got very interesting. The hot debate in the NBA about load management continues, and the Cleveland Cavaliers this time are at the very center of it. Welcome to another episode of Cavs Digest, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me today. Happy Thursday. I'm your host, Darayus Sethna. Thanks so much for joining me today. And before we get into all things Cavs, make sure you like this video and, more importantly, subscribe to that Cavs Digest YouTube channel. Pulling up the stats for you again here. My apologies on that. Last one. So just a friendly reminder, a little over 2/3 of you who watch these videos aren't actually subscribed to our channel. So we want to change that. Make sure you like these videos, subscribe to the channel so you're up to date with all things Cavs, news, post-game reaction, everything you want. Matt's been doing a fantastic job. So if you want to continue to see more of my work and Matt's fantastic work, like the videos and subscribe to the channel. All right, everybody, let's get into it today. And I think today's video is going to be a little bit longer, and I think just a little more analytical and kind of following through on a lot of different elements here. So the debate around load management is heating up, especially here in Cleveland. So I saw a recent article on Cleveland.com, and I have some colleagues who are mentors of mine at Cleveland.com. A couple of them cover the Cavs, and there was an article and a podcast on Cleveland.com about this issue of load management and specifically how it relates to the Cavs. So for those who, if you're not familiar with what happened recently, earlier in the week, the Cleveland Cavaliers were fined $100,000 by the NBA in violation of the league's player policy. And this was because last Wednesday against the Miami Heat, the Cleveland Cavaliers did not play Donovan Mitchell or Evan Mobley due to rest. And that was the reason they gave in the injury report heading into the Miami game, was rest. So I give the Cavaliers credit here, Kenny Atkinson, the whole staff. They were upfront about why they weren't playing the Evan Mobley and Donovan Mitchell. It's not like they lied and said they had some phony back injury, because that really creates problems in its own, especially from a PR standpoint. So I respect and give credit to Atkinson and everybody on that staff for being explicit about why Mobley and Mitchell weren't playing. And the Cleveland.com reporters, specifically Chris Fedor, who's been covering the Cavs for a very long time, Jimmy Watkins as well, they mentioned specifically the Cavs have, and they really have had, a very tough start to the year in terms of scheduling. You could argue they've had the toughest start amongst all 30 NBA teams. The Cavs have played, heading into Tuesday, played 15 games in 27 days, the most of any NBA team in that span. Now, you're probably wondering, the specific violation, why were the Cavs fined? This violation of the NBA's participation policy. Now, here are all the guidelines of the participation policy itself. Now, this policy was implemented prior to the start of the 2023-24 season, so it's still only a couple years old. But I just wanted to go over some of the policy. The way today's video is going to be organized is I'm going to start by giving you the facts, so what I'm doing right now. Then I'm going to go into what the Cleveland.com reporters are arguing and kind of what in favor of the Cavs argument. And then I'm going to give you my take on things. So it's going to be like facts, going over, the opinions, each side, and then I'm going to give you my take at the end. So let's stay with the facts here. Here's the participation policy. So under the policy, here are essentially the guidelines. So just to be clear, Evan Mobley and Donovan Mitchell are star players and fall under all of these categories in the policy. So managing the roster to ensure that no more than one star player is unavailable for the same game, ensuring that star players are available for all national television and NBA in-season tournament games, maintaining a balance between the number of one-game absences for a star player in home and road games, refrain from any long-term shutdowns in which a player stops playing games, and if resting a healthy player, ensure that the player is present at the games and visible to fans. Now, that last one, Mobley and Mitchell were in Miami. They were dressed in street clothes, and they were there. So like I said, I'm not saying the Cavs are 100% wrong, and I'm going to give my 2 cents here, but starting here, I think the Cavs, you have to give them credit. At least Mobley and Mitchell were there. Yes, you want to see them suited up, and you give the Cavs credit for being explicit about why they weren't playing. So, and then this last one, real snippet here, the policy includes exceptions for injuries, personal reasons, and pre-approved back-to-back restrictions. Now, that's Lonzo Ball specifically because of his serious injury history, as you see in that final line there. So when you see Lonzo Ball not playing in the first or second night of a back-to-back, that obviously makes sense, right, from an injury management standpoint. So this isn't, players need to play all 82 games, all that kind of stuff. Definitely not. You want to be smart in terms of how you go about managing your players, especially in the case of Lonzo Ball, who has an extensive injury history. Going into some of the quotes here from the reporters at Cleveland.com, what they were talking about, and in the article stating how this week's fine comes at a time when injuries are mounting across the league. And this was a really interesting point that they made. And Victor Wembanyama, Giannis Antetokounmpo got injured earlier this week against the Cavs. Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonard, Ja Morant, Zion Williamson, Paolo Banchero. The list goes on. Trae Young, several others. Man, those are a lot of superstars who are already missing time this season. Several others are currently sidelined with various ailments. This context makes the penalty against Cleveland feel especially misguided. And I think this is a great point for those who are arguing that the Cavs should not have been fined, that this is ridiculous, this should not have happened. This is definitely great evidence to prove that, because it's not just the Cavs. A lot of stars are already missing time, and that's significantly impacting their respective teams. And if you're the Cavs, you don't want something to happen to Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley. You're already dealing with Darius Garland missing pretty much this significant portion of this early season. So from the Cavs front office perspective, you'd think this is a smart move, and hence you're saying, hey, the Cavs should not be getting fined here by the NBA. The second quote here that also caught my eye, thought was very interesting. The introduction of the NBA Cup, this in-season tournament, has compressed the early season schedule, creating exactly the kind of congestion that necessitates load management. Yet instead of addressing the structural issue, the league is punishing teams for making health-conscious decisions. So this last part of the quote to me is really what stands out. So teams, yes, are making health-conscious decisions. And I think when you look at quotes like this, it's important to really understand where these teams are coming from. And this is something that I mentioned earlier in the week in my last video. You're always, as a reporter in these positions, you always have to analyze different situations, both from the fan perspective, but you also have to analyze it from the front office, the team's perspective, the day-to-day operations of the actual basketball team itself. Now, fans are incredibly, incredibly important. But I do think they obviously have a very, fans like myself and Matt and others, we have a very different perception of what should be happening versus Kenny Atkinson, Koby Altman, the Cavs medical staff. What is the best option? But here's where I get into what my opinion is. And first and foremost, I do not want to, just go about saying that these reporters are wrong. There's no right or wrong here. I absolutely agree and take into consideration that what all of those reporters on Cleveland.com said, what other people have said about the Cavs getting fined. But at the end of the day, I agree with the fine, simply from a legal standpoint as well. These were rules. The Cavs knew about these rules going into that game in Miami. Kenny Atkinson and company knew that, hey, if we rest these guys, even if we're true about it, we're explicit about it, there's still a possibility that there could be some consequences in this. Whether we believe those are right or wrong, that's the case. And by the letter of that NBA player policy, by the letter of, by the letter of this policy, Kenny Atkinson and the Cavaliers should have been fined for resting Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley. So, and again, I'm certainly not going to say the Cavs medical staff, the reporters are wrong. Honestly, they have a lot more insight. They've been doing this a lot longer than me. So I'm going to be humbled in that position. They have a lot more insight than I do. They know these players, they know these teams a lot more. But that's why I want to bring in the fan perspective in this as well. I think it's really important that we never lose sight of what the fans are hoping for, right? The NBA has geared so much of what they're trying to do towards fan engagement, right? They've been playing around with this All-Star game for years now. They've implemented this in-season tournament to draw attention to the league earlier on in the season with the crazy court designs and things like that. So again, I'm looking at it from a fan standpoint, which is ultimately why I agree with the fine. When I heard about this news, I was like, my initial reaction was, yeah, that's what you'd expect. That's the letter of the law. The Cavs knew what they were doing, and guess what? Whether they think it's right or wrong, that's the fine. Those are the rules that the NBA has implemented across all of its teams. Now, when I'm thinking of, I think that point that the Cleveland.com reporters made about a lot of stars missing time is crucial. And you don't want to see LeBron just came back, managing injury. Joel Embiid has had a history of injuries, and obviously Jason Tatum. So you're seeing a lot of stars, Tyrese Halliburton, who are already not playing. A couple of those guys not going to play at all this year. Then you already have, like I said in that list, Paolo Banchero, Trae Young, all those guys, Kawhi Leonard, who's had a history of, he's Mr. Load Management, honestly. But at the end of the day, you don't want to see more guys missing time. So that's a great argument. And again, I'm not saying that they are completely wrong or anything like that. To me, and I'm going to say this, it's about balancing what the fans want between how do you play these players as much as possible in order to keep it as equal as you can. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know how to do that. I don't have the answer to that. I'm not going to sit up here and act like I have the answer to everything. But I think it is really important that when the NBA implements these fines, and this is kind of my main theme for today, when this fine is implemented and people are making an uproar about the Cavs shouldn't have been fined, and the reporters are explaining why, and Kenny Atkinson kind of doubled down on didn't regret the fine, and that's absolutely fine. Again, you give credit to them for being open and honest about why Mitchell and Mobley didn't play. But optics to me matter, and the fans matter. These are hardworking people who pay a lot of money to go to these games. Our family is one of them, right? We work hard. We pay a lot of money to go to these games, and I think that argument of there are a lot of people who can only afford to go to one game a year just to see that one favorite player, whether it's on the Cavs or on the opposing team. And those are life-changing experiences. And I'm sure Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley wanted to play in that game against Miami. But obviously when you have the medical staff who know what they're doing, the coaching staff who know what they're doing, again, not discrediting anybody here, they know better than me. But I'm just simply arguing it from a fan standpoint. And I think it's really important that we do take that into consideration when those decisions are made. And again, I know the NBA certainly has a lot of work to do in terms of how do they continue to implement a style of basketball or a schedule where players can play more often in front of fans, where it's not so compressed, and you're essentially still keeping the fans happy and, more importantly, keeping them engaged. And I don't know really what the best solution is to that. It seems like all of this is still a work in progress. But I just wanted to make this video to just reiterate how important the fans are to the league. Optics matter. And, when I was making the video and doing all my prepping for today's show, it got me thinking about last week. So, the Cavs had that trip in Miami. That second game where Mitchell and Mobley didn't play was the second of that 2-game road trip in Miami. So the Cavs were there on Monday, played against the Heat, lost in overtime, if you remember. It's kind of crazy, that's already a week ago, to Andrew Wiggins on that lob dunk, out of bounds play in overtime. You have a day off. This is a critical part. You have a day off on Tuesday, but you're not traveling. You're in Miami. You get to stay there, practice, do your thing. Wednesday night, Mitchell and Mobley do not play. Now, obviously, if you're a Cavs fan, basketball, you're probably saying, hey, you're going to rest them. fine. You'd rather see them play probably, but you understand, someone like me understands why Mitchell and Mobley didn't play. Now, I disagree with it, but I can understand. Those guys know what they're doing. The medical staff, the personnel, not going to question any of that. But the optics still matter. And I ask you this kind of to end out the video. Does it look good for the Cavs, if you're maybe not as big of a basketball fan, you're more of a casual fan, whatever, does it look good for the Cavs if you lose in overtime, you were down for most of the game, you come back, lose in overtime, have an off day, and then the next night you're not playing your stars due to rest when you had a day off the day before? Now, I know that next night they did have, it was the first night of the back-to-back, that Wednesday game, because they played Toronto in Cleveland last week, so you can make an argument, well, they were just resting to play on the second night of the back-to-back. Now, Mitchell and Mobley did play in that game against Toronto. Mobley had his worst game of the year in that game. That's a whole other debate for another day. But I'm just telling you optically, the whole Miami trip, does it look good when you lose in overtime, have a day off the next day, and then don't play in the second game because of rest? And that second game, you could have proven, hey, you know what, that game against Miami was a fluke. We're going to show them again why we swept them in the first round of the playoffs. We need to get our get back before we go home. That was me, the more old school thinking. I just think that is the mindset I would have had, because again, I'm raised old school. I have those old school values of you play in as many games as you play in, kind of that Jordan era mentality. But again, the science is showing us we need to be more cognizant of injury management, things like that. And again, want to emphasize not discrediting the health professionals, the coaching staff, the reporters at Cleveland.com. They have a lot more insight and knowledge than I do as someone who looks at it from the outside. But as a journalist and as someone who's been watching the NBA for a while, I will go to my grave saying that optics matter. And this is not a good look for the Cavs. They knew what they were doing in Miami, and they should have known about the fine coming. They got fined. It's the letter of the law. And you know what you do? You pay the fine and you move on. Cavs had a tough loss last night to Houston. We'll see what happens as they continue to the back end of this homestand now. But again, this is a little longer of a video, but I wanted to really break down and be thorough on my opinion about the Cavs and this fine. I do think it was the right move, whether I'm in the majority or the minority of that opinion. I do think it was right on the league to come down on the Cavs with this, because at the end of the day, you have to hold teams accountable, because for the sake of the fans, it's important. Without the fans, and we kind of saw this in COVID, you don't have a league. You don't have that engagement. And I'm not saying you completely discredit the health of the players or push them to the side, because your players are what, drive revenue and all of those, fun business things that we can have another episode on. They're important, but the fans are just as important. And I think this fine from the NBA just reinforces that, hey, if you're ready, if you can play, you can play. If you can suit up to play basketball a few times a week, then you have to be able to do it. So those are my 2 cents on things, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below on load management, what the Cavs have been doing in regards to load management. Whatever you want to say, I want to hear what you have to say, and put it in the comments below. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our Cavs Digest YouTube channel. Thanks so much again for joining me, everybody. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Cavs Digest. Have fun, everybody. Take care.